Hey there, this is Ari. Welcome back to the Energy Blueprint podcast. With me now for the second or third time, maybe including the summit interview, is Dr. Eric Zielinski. He's a leading expert on the science around the health benefits of essential oils, and he's the author of the national bestseller, The Healing Power of Essential Oils and the Essential Oils Apothecary. His website is naturallivingfamily.com. And it has rapidly become the #1 online resource for non-branded essential oils education. That is, essential oils educational content that is not affiliated with any particular brand of essential oils. And it is now visited by more than 3 million natural health seekers every year. So welcome back, my friend. Such a pleasure to connect with you again.
Hey, thanks so much, Ari. I really appreciate it and love what you're doing. It was that summit that you produced was fantastic, and can't wait to share. Basically, this is kind of like part 2 of the first talk that we had. It's just like, okay, what's happened since the last talk and all the research that I've done, because all that information is just going into this new book, The Essential Oils Apothecary. So thanks for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, my pleasure. We got a ton of really positive feedback on it, and I love how you pulled so many cool studies on brain benefits, energy benefits, mood benefits of these different essential oils, and a lot of also a lot of ones that were novel that not a lot of people have heard about before. So yeah, lots of positive feedback. So in this new book, The Essential Oils Apothecary, one of the things that you talk about, which happens to be one of my favorite topics, and I don't think that I've ever done a podcast on it, or maybe even mentioned it much in the podcast, but forest bathing, or shinrin-yoku, as it's called in Japan, which is where most of the research on this originated. So talk to me about that science. What is the connection between forest bathing? First of all, what is forest bathing? Some people might have an image of like taking a bathtub into the forest and taking a bath and scrubbing their armpits. But what is forest bathing, and what is the connection to health, and what's the science around that?
So it was early on in the pandemic, and there was more and more discussion about, okay, what are the real health ramifications of being indoors all day long? And up until 2020, as a society, we have averaged roughly about 93%. Which just chew on that for just a minute. Pre-COVID, 93% of our lives were spent indoors. That's, if you live to 100 years old, that's, just 7 years of your life playing outside, getting fresh air, enjoying sunlight, like touching the grass. I mean, just it's hard to conceptualize when now we're at a point where I don't have the research yet, Ari, because it hasn't been done, but I think just a casual observation of just the lifestyle of most people, I would say most people are inching towards 98 to 99% of their time. Some people literally have not left their home at all in the last year. And so there became this resurgence of interest in, okay, what is therapy outside? Why are we even talking about this? Because the exact opposite of living indoors is being outside when it comes to nature, breathing fresh air. And what makes it fresh? What is forest bathing? So shinrin-yoku is a practice that basically has just been a practice of ancient civilization since the beginning of time. And it wasn't until the early to mid 80s that Dr. Zheng and other researchers in Japan started researching it, because it became a fallen lost art, right? Dr. Lee in his book, Forest Bathing, I highly recommend it. Just type up Dr. Lee on Amazon and look up forest bathing. And he started talking about, this was his way of life, living in a village, and it was densely wooded and just being outside most of the time. And then next thing you know, modern civilization hit, and people moving from the rural areas to especially what is the most densely populated city on the planet, Tokyo. And so he started recognizing health issues and an observation like mental health concerns are much higher in the city. And why is that? And started looking at this whole concept. And so it dawned on him that literally being outside in nature, being, not doing, anything. And this is hard for a lot of Americans and Australians and people in industrial countries to conceptualize. You're not hiking. You're not trying to do a marathon. You're not doing a mud runner or whatever these fun little races are. You're literally just outside, just soaking in the environment. It's why it's called forest bathing. You're bathing into just the atmosphere of being outside in a densely wooded area. And Dr. Lee started researching the health benefits of it, and everything from a rapid extreme boost in natural killer cells, the natural immune boosting properties that kill cancer cells, but also help fight inflammation. Not only that, but a dramatic decrease in mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, panic, reduction, obviously, you would think of stress, overwhelm, but this sense of awe, the sense of belonging, the sense of purpose, like throughout all different cultures, throughout all the generations, we need to have this sense of a higher power. As a Christian, I relate to being out in nature and praising God and thinking, wow, God, look at this beautiful creation created. For people that don't ascribe to that philosophy, it's being out in a place where you do have that awestruck wonder, and that awestruck wonder gives you that childlike glee, that excitement, that vigor of life, that you are part of something bigger. That helps with hopelessness. That helps with overwhelm. Like, these are very practical, evidence-based strategies that all from nature. Ari, there's a word, because the English language is very remiss to be as colorful and descriptive. And if you studied other languages, we're limited in what we can say. There is a word in Japanese that actually describes the type of sunlight that shines through the leaves of trees. Like, I just had to explain that in 15 words. They have one word just describe. That's what shinrin-yoku does. So you're outside, you're enjoying just being out in nature. Hopefully you could put yourself in a situation where you're actually touching nature, like putting your hand into a stream or picking a leaf or walking barefoot, getting grounded. You are breathing in those volatile organic compounds that are being emitted from the plants, AKA the essential oils, which is one reason why, Ari, when we were forced to quarantine early on in 2020, intuitively, I was drawn to the tree oils, unlike I have been in years, ever, in fact. Like cedar wood. Like, I just felt this craving. Now, I'm gonna say it. I don't think, and I can't prove, that we could become essential oil deficient. No, essential oils are secondary metabolites. They're not necessary for like cellular function. Like, they're not like carbs or minerals or fats or proteins. They're second. They are beneficial for life. But my body became so adapted to enjoying nature, being outside, that I was craving it, like, intuitively. So early on in the pandemic, I started to diffuse like cedar wood and sandalwood and frankincense and myrrh and Douglas fir and orange. Douglas fir has a nice subtle citrus scent to it. Normally it blends so well with orange. That became my anchor in the pandemic. When all hell was breaking loose, when we were all figuring out what to do, and my kids were stuck home virtually schooling because our school shut down temporarily. Thank God we're open up back now again. I had that anchor, and it brought outside in. And then it hit me. Why am I inside? I need to be more intentional. So now it became where, I think as a whole, we are learning to adapt to how to mold and shape and overcome obstacles always, right? That's human civilization, but especially the obstacles that a lot of people are dealing with in industrial society with restrictions that they have on their lives. I really became more intentional. Like, I have to be purposeful. Like, I actually have to put like going outside, breathing in nature part of my calendar, because if I don't do it, I'm going to lose it, and I'm going to be stuck on Zoom all day, or I'm going to be stuck in this box. So all that to say is that it hit me in a big way last year, and it became the precipice and the springboard for my entire new book about chronic conditions. Because what we're finding is, one forest bathing session, again, just being out in nature, just breathing, enjoying. Maybe it's at a park, you have a picnic with your family. You might just do some, photography, or you're doing yoga, whatever. You're just enjoying yourself. 1 2-hour forest bathing session has such a profound impact on your immune function and mental health that it will last statistically for over 4 weeks.
Wow.
Like, they actually did the natural killer cell analysis on patients after a 2-hour session weekly. But Here's the thing, and this is where I have to be very transparent. Guess what? Essential oils do not give you the same effect as being out in nature. Being out in nature is best. Essential oils are second best. And that's what I'm all about here. Like, okay, maybe you can spend all day in nature. I can't. But guess what? I could bring nature inside. And that's where I'm really been focusing more on the aromatherapy aspect of my life to really counteract whatever it is that's happening around me. There's so much to talk about forest bathing, and I encourage people to really dive into it. The National Geographic did a great write-up on it a few years ago. And reading Dr. Lee's book has opened up my mind, because they use it as medicine. They actually have forest bathing centers. Like there's a couple dozen centers in Japan that they have practitioners that do pre and post forest bathing analyses and work up on you. They actually prescribe to you what you should do and help you. Like, okay, you go to a forest bathing center. And then like, okay, here's your, your mental health concerns, your physical health. They actually do like a physical, like a history and a write-up on you. And like, okay, here's what we recommend you do for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. Come back and let's walk you through. Like, can you imagine? Can you imagine if that were part of your insurance program? If they would cover, going to have a forest bathing session, and what that's doing for the mental health and awareness of people in our nation, in whatever nation you live in your country. So all that to say is that I have become, maybe you can hear it in my voice, but it's like, I've been doing this essential oil thing professionally for a while now. And it's like regularly, every few months, it's like, wow, something really cool, really new. Like this was one of those aha moments that put an indelible mark in my life. And now I've really been diving deep into this, and literally has changed what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I'm trying to tap in to more of being outside to enjoy not only just the natural aromatherapy that you get out. This was an aha moment for me. When you're cutting your grass and you smell the grass aroma, like, what do you think that is? Like, that's the aromatherapy. That is the essential oil being emitted from the freshly cut grass.
Yeah,
In the same way,
I was
right?
to ask you to clarify that, because I think some people might not follow the connection between forest bathing and essential oils very clearly. But those plants, whether you're in a forest of spruce or Douglas fir or whatever, pine trees, when you are walking through that forest, those trees actually release volatile oils that are microscopic and invisible. They're floating around in the air, and when you smell them, those those chemicals from those essential oils from those trees are now entering your body and are interacting with your physiology, where they create all kinds of health benefits. Is that accurate, or how would you phrase that differently? If
So that's the perfect summary. And it's everything. It's from the dirt, it's from the shrubs, primarily the trees. The trees are really where the healing is, rich in pinene, rich in other chemicals that are like limonene, that are extremely anti-inflammatory, antidepressive, anxiolytic. They fight anxiety. So essentially, what aromatherapists do is extract the bark or the leaves or the roots of these trees, and they steam distill it. So they'll take exceptional amount of plant matter, they'll steam distill it, and they'll get the volatile oil that comes from it. And when you're out in nature, and then when you're also the same thing when you're inside your home, when you inhale an essential oil, you are now under the guise of the olfactory system. And that's another science that I don't think enough people are talking about. There is no other direct direct connection to the brain. There is no direct connection to the brain like there is in the olfactory system. Every other system in your body. So for example, when you cut yourself accidentally or when you stub your toe, that microsecond or two, depending on how really keen your senses are, before you actually sense the pain. I have a baby, and Ezekiel now is almost 5 months old. He was doing something. He had a toy in his hand. You know how babies are. Like, boom, he hit his head. And I kid you not, Ari, I could count like 3 seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And then it was like, wah! It took him 3 seconds for the pain to finally get to his brain, be like, hey, you hurt yourself. And that's that's what it's like for all sensation, all neurological systems that have to go through the thalamic relay. It's basically all sensory input has to go through the thalamus in the brain to be interpreted so the brain knows what to do with it. That prevents us from being hyper stimulated. But the olfactory system, it's our primal brain. It's the first part of the brain that develops when you are in utero. It is what connects us to the primates. Like, this is at the core of who we are as mammals. So when you smell something, and this was also our first mechanism of defense. Like, how did our ancestors know what foods were safe or not to eat? I mean, think of it. Yes, there were trial and error, and some people like would eat a berry and they would die. But the reality was their sense of smell was so much more keen than our sense now, that was a big part. And that's why you see in the animal world how sense of smell really is a driver for their safety. Sense of smell should be a driver for our safety and protection. So we shouldn't need, quite frankly, a smoke detector in our home to tell us, hey, there's smoke. Our sense of smell should theoretically be keen enough. And it was thousands of years ago. So what I'm saying is, when you talk about olfaction, there is no thalamic relay. You smell something, instant reaction to your brain. And here's the thing. When you smell something, those volatile particles that are being emitted from the trees, from the plants, those are physical particles that interact with the nasal mucosa in your nose that stimulate the olfactory system. And through the olfactory bulb in the olfactory cortex, what we have is direct communication to the limbic system, where your mood, your memory, your emotions are managed, and also autonomic function, Ari, your heart rate, your breathing rate. And also when you're breathing in chemicals from the air, again, good chemicals, volatile organic chemicals, you get a systemic reaction because they're going through your respiratory system. And that's where they get into very slight, very slight. Now, when you really want to use essential oils as medicine, that's where we extract them from the plants. You could put them in capsule form. You can apply them topically. And that's where we really start seeing more of a profound therapeutic effect on things like we might talk about today. I don't know, chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, or any of the list of chronic conditions that I cover in my new book. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. It was a great summary. It's like when you smell anything, when you put your nose into a rose and you're smelling the aroma, like actually is a physical particle being emitted. And that has a direct neurological, physiological response on your brain. And hopefully, if used properly, it could have a profound effect and a therapeutic effect to give you what you need to experience an abundant life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And on that last point, it's interesting. I've noticed over the years that a lot of people don't necessarily understand that when they smell something, that means chemicals are literally entering their body. So I often think of like gardeners who are using gas-powered leaf blowers and other gas-powered gardening tools, and they're inhaling gasoline fumes for hours every day. And I've literally encountered, I would say the vast majority of people literally think that smelling something means you're just sort of smelling it, but they don't understand the next step, which is that those are molecules of that chemical that are entering their bodies, that are going into their bloodstream, that need to be detoxified, that needs to be eliminated. But on the other side of that, on the flip side of that, you have these essential oils from pine trees, from all these different plants, and from flowers, from roses, as you said. You would really enjoy on my property about 100 feet this way outside the window from me. I have a giant ylang ylang tree.
Wow.
The most beautiful smell, and it's just, you walk within 20 feet of that tree and you're just bombarded with this amazing scent. And you can feel it. You know, if you grab one of these flowers and you smell it, you can feel your physiology change within a few seconds, and it's quite remarkable to feel that. So, anyway, to move into the next topic, I want to talk to you about stress and anxiety, because obviously in this whole COVID era for the last year, tons and tons of people have experienced enormous emotional distress and stress and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the ways that people can combat that using some of your strategies?
Ari, you mentioned something that is a great segue into this. Um, you mentioned about, and myself included, I didn't really recognize what was happening. One of the great things that has happened because of COVID is this awareness of airborne particles, right? Remember when it's common knowledge for us who understand virology, but when we found out the discovery that it's airborne, well, that's been my world for nearly a decade now. Like, so first of all, think in terms of if people are doing things, whatever it might be. Again, think of the world wearing masks, social distancing, buying high powered air purifiers to clean out or protect themselves from an airborne threat. What other airborne threats are around you? And when it comes to anxiety and stress, that's where I want to start it. Because yes, essential oils are profound. Like, I mean, instantly, like you mentioned ylang ylang, which is, we'll cover more on that in just a minute, a known harmonizer, wonderful anxiolytic property. Like you literally can't help but you will be put into a situation where your physiology will respond irrespective of how you want to feel. And that's something really interesting. That's how you could use aromatherapy around Alzheimer's dementia patients. That's how you can use aromatherapy with children who don't necessarily know what's happening or they don't really want something, but you could change how they feel. It's like forcing them to take a pharmaceutical and having a desired effect. We're just putting wonderful compounds in the air to give them a wonderful physiology with stress reduction, anxiety management. So ylang ylang is a great one. But you mentioned about, not realizing what is in the air. And so to start, what I want to do is I want to help essentially stop the bleeding. And if you have aerosols, anything from a plug-in to a poo-poo spray to a cleaner, anything, a cologne, a perfume, a body care item, shampoo, lipstick, I don't care. Anything that has an artificial fragrance to it will cause neurological inflammation. It is a toxin. It is an airborne threat. It is an airborne threat that is infinitely more dangerous, that has been linked to Alzheimer's, dementia, autoimmunity, ADHD. Of course, you would think asthma and allergies, but that's like lesser of a concern than cancer, but it has been linked to cancer. Chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. So what I want people to do, first of all, is see this big picture. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. So our body can become more sensitized, because the danger is we become adapted, or we are becoming victims of olfactory adaptation, where we don't even, our sense of smell has become so dampened that someone can be in an environment like a store like Bath and Body Works filled with unbelievable amounts of harmful volatile organic compounds, and they're fine. If I walk into a place like that, no joke, I start getting anxious like immediately, because my body's like, this is not good. It goes back to my ancestry. It goes back to evolution of man and women. That is like, whoa, get out of Dodge. This is not good. This is not safe. There's anxiousness, immediately stress. My nose will start to run. I'll get a headache if I don't leave out of there quick. It's like, get out of Dodge. This is not healthy for you. So first, I would help people literally throw out anything that has the word synthetic fragrance in it. If it has the word parfum in it or fragrance, if it's not completely natural essential oil based, which I'll tell you, it'll be on the label, because anyone spending that money on their product, they're going to brag on the fact they have real essential oils in it. So if you see fragrance, parfum, or you know, what's the other one? Artificial is not as much as you'll see as artificial fragrance, but you'll see like primarily fragrance and parfum. Throw it out. And then what does that mean? Let's start to revisit this whole scenario with an open mind. And I would encourage you, go scent free for a while. It's kind of like a water fast. It's kind of like an elimination diet. See what life's like being scent free. Now, when you go out in nature, it's like, whoa, you really can start smelling the volatile organic compounds being outside like readily. And so when you talk about stress and anxiety, now we just stopped the root cause. a root cause of stress and anxiety that most people aren't recognizing, especially if you're in your home for 98, 99% of your time. Think about opening up your windows, getting an air purifier, really fresh air. And now let's kind of flip things on its head. And if you need more of a medicinal therapeutic approach, if you're like me, and I used to deal with clinical depression, anxiety, and panic attacks, that marked my late teens to my early 20s. If you're like me, and if that's something you deal with, there are several essential oils, and you mentioned one of them, ylang ylang, that can help. Sandalwood's another one. Sandalwood and ylang ylang are known harmonizers. They're actually, it's a word in the literature talking about the harmonization effect that these essential oils can have on your physiology. It creates homeostasis. So if you need to be even a little more excited, or if you need to kind of calm down a little bit, both those oils will help you reach kind of a kilter state. And it helps with these major mood swings. It's great for bipolar, especially. But a number of oils in the citrus family, because of limonene, a number of reasons why. A, because limonene is exceptionally anti-inflammatory, but it also helps produce dopamine and serotonin. So we're now looking at changing the physiology of your brain chemistry. And bergamot's been shown to have a GABA, GABA like effect on anxiety. And so you have bergamot, neroli, petit grain, orange, lime, lemon, grapefruit. These are very common essential oils that you could readily find on the market. And I would say start with that. And here's one thing. This is a recent study, Ari, I pulled in my new book. It's something that I've just always been drawn to. Maybe because I was raised with, orange Julius or creamsicles, or I always like that flavor. But orange and vanilla have an uncanny ability to synergize together. And that's something where I really focus in my book on synergy blends, because one oil is good, but when you combine a couple in a certain way, it's a wonder, because they complement each other. So there's been a recent research study that put together roughly 24, 25 subjects into a hopeless, helpless situation. First of all, let's give research participants credit. Like, these people only make a couple $100, like for them, most of the time, for them to put themselves in these situations, these people willingly put themselves in a situation where they were going to be assigned a hopeless, helpless task. And in light of 2020, it's really not ironic. I feel it's coincidental. Their task was to solve a social discrimination dilemma, essentially solve racism in 10 minutes. Global, right? Who can do that? But they were stuck in this environment inside. They had two groups. One group had no smell. The other group had a mixture of limonene and vanillin, which are the chemical components primarily found in orange and vanilla. And the people doing the hopeless task, they got burned out. They felt hopeless. They felt helpless. I couldn't do this. They got frustrated. It was not a desirable experience. But the other people going through the same exact task, but only the difference was they had the aroma of vanillin and limonene being diffused in through the air. As they enjoyed the smell, which all of them reported they enjoyed the smell, the more the smell was pleasant to them, the happier they were, the more readily available and empowered they were to overcome the fact that they couldn't solve this task, and the less overwhelmed, the less stressed, the less anxious, the less depressed, the less everything. And so the researchers concluded, doing a task that might seem like a monumental task, maybe it's running a marathon, maybe it's doing your taxes. Like, how many people can overwhelm? It's a hopeless task. It's tax season coming up in some people's society. Whatever it is, if there's a hopeless or helpless task in front of you, if you're dealing right now because of the pandemic, if you're dealing with a level of hopelessness or helplessness, if you've having a smell to anchor that makes you feel better will help you through that. So now it's not as hopeless, it's not as helpless. And I would suggest try with orange and vanilla. And it's something that my wife and I, we call it our joyful oil. We create a 2% dilution body oil, and I'll explain that in just a second. And we basically anoint our kids with that every day and send them off to school. So they smell like just living, breathing, healthy dreamsicles. And a 2% dilution
They smell like walking orange Julius's.
And the teachers love it. Every time a new teacher comes or a kid goes into a new class, because we have 4 kids 5, the baby won't be in school for a couple years. But the teachers always say, your kids smell so good. They're always happy. Like they just like, they're just walking diffusers, right? A 2% dilution is regularly unified accepted, right? It's uniformly accepted as a safe dilution for skincare. And I would say that's safe. 1% to 2% dilution is safe for kids and all sensitive skin. And what that's a fancy way of saying is you want to dilute your essential oils with like a fatty carrier, such as coconut oil, olive oil, jojoba, or sweet almond. So a 2% dilution would be, let's start with an ounce of, let's say, organic unrefined coconut oil or olive oil. And then you put 6 drops of orange oil, 6 drops of vanilla. That's it. That's 12 drops in total. 12 drops within that mixture is a 2% dilution. That's safe. And that, by the way, your oil will last you a long time.
Mhm.
Your little bottle of essential oil should last you a few months, if not a little bit longer. For us, we use them for everything. We go through a lot more, but there's also in our cleaning products or body care. But that's a good start to the day. You mentioned ylang ylang. Ylang ylang blends wonderfully with lime and frankincense. It's one of my favorite blends. And it's just a nice little citrusy, groundsy, woodsy, because you bring the frankincense in. But ylang ylang is a wonderful anxiolytic and helps stress. And like you said, you can't but help feel better. But interesting thing about anxiety and ylang ylang is you'll find ylang ylang in a lot of libido boosting blends. And we actually have a chapter in my new book on erectile dysfunction and libido. Ari, yeah, I know you'd appreciate this as a blogger and a marketer online. My number one search term for people that go to my website to learn about essential oils is essential oils for sex. And that struck me because I don't get a lot of questions from, the millions of people that follow us. We don't get people chatting like, hey, I'm dealing with erectile dysfunction. What do I do? That's one of those secret things that people are like, okay, let me type and let me find out.
Yeah.
And it's been consistent. There's obviously a problem that people are dealing with. And one of the issues with sex, specifically, especially men, and I cover this in great length, if guys are dealing with ED, there's a huge root and a component for stress and anxiety and overwhelm.
Mhm.
And that's where essential oils like ylang ylang can come and help. And ylang ylang isn't a known aphrodisiac. It's actually been shown clinically to help reduce the anxiety related to stress. Well,
Mhm.
why would I have anxiety related to stress? I love sex. Well, you do, but a woman with vaginal dryness doesn't, or someone in a potentially, abusive situation doesn't, or a man struggling with erectile dysfunction may not really, they might be anxious about that experience, right? So imagine you put yourself into this rest and digest parasympathetic state. And that's really what I cover a lot, because that's really, because I know it's almost cliche in our space, Ari, the sympathetic, parasympathetic state, but it's real physiology. Like to have a vibrant sex life, to be able to manage the stressors of the day, you got to be able to get out of that fight or flight state. And that's where ylang ylang can help. A number of other oils, but I shared a few just off the cuff. And then going back to forest bathing, forest bathing, anything that you could see that has a tree to it. And again, for you, for a perfect example, your ylang ylang tree. It's like that is also very relevant because of the blossom of ylang ylang. It doesn't have to be like the bark of the tree, right? It could be the root of the tree, like vetiver. It could be the resin of the tree, like frankincense or copaiba, or the actual, like wood of the tree, cedar wood, sandalwood,
Let
Douglas
me
fir.
quick digression on a
Yeah.
personal note. What's vetiver good for? I actually have vetiver grass all over my property here.
Oh, um, vetiver grass is wonderfully effective. Been shown clinically, actually, in a little pilot study of a couple dozen kids with ADD and focus, mental acuity. Our sleepy time blend is an equal mixture of vetiver, Roman chamomile, and lavender. They blend really well. Vetiver is an instant parasympathetic stimulator. Like it will put you in that parasympathetic state. It's very, very woodsy. You can even create like a tea out of it. It's safe. There are a number of different things that you could do with it. But if you could get your hands on some vetiver oil, I think you'll really be excited to see what it could do for a number of different things, but primarily with
I
calm.
don't think I can bring myself to buy vetiver oil when I have a few acres with like an enormous amount of vetiver. Like I could never get through it in a lifetime. I mean, it's everywhere. If I use 10 pounds per day, I wouldn't get through it all.
Wow. Yeah, we'll have to get you a distiller, my friend. We'll have to get you start steam distilling it.
Yeah, I
And
need
the root,
someone.
vetiver root itself, that's what is very healing. So
Okay.
yeah, you would make a tea, you can consume the leaves, but actually the root itself especially. But yeah, um, sounds like I got to go down there to do a little aromatherapy on your house. You got a Lang Lang vetiver? Like this is a stuff I get in bottles, man. I don't see this in nature. I'm going down. I'm going down.
Indeed. So I want to get into something else you talk about in your book, which is forgiveness therapy and
Ooh.
the role of aromatherapy in that context. So talk to me about that.
Okay. So in the book, it's again Essential Oils Apothecary, advanced strategies and protocols for chronic disease and conditions. I say that because we're dealing with chronic things like libido, stress, anxiety, depression, addiction. We cover all that, but also what about fatigue and pain and more significant conditions, because they all compound one another. And there's a reason I'm mentioning this in the context of forgiveness, is that one commonality that we see is this subtle root of bitterness, this feeling of being wronged that someone has from a real life actual experience of being hurt, traumatized, abused, or a fabricated experience that maybe things didn't happen the way that they think, but they still feel it, which is still real to them, which is valid. We need to validate. You'll see this underlying suspicion, which ultimately causes this chronic stress response in people at a very deep emotional level. And research has been done specifically on chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, which are very similar, have a lot of things in common. And the link of forgiveness or their lack thereof. And what they did was they guided people through forgiveness therapy sessions. And forgiveness doesn't mean I'll make allowance for. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to celebrate Thanksgiving dinner with that person. Forgiveness means literally letting go. I mean, having unforgiveness in your heart, bitterness, anger, it's resentment. It like you just feel like this. If you're watching on a video, you're just crunched over, you're just like, right? It's not relaxing, and there's no love, there's no peace. It's everything opposite of health. Unforgiveness. If you have unforgiveness in your heart for someone, it's literally like drinking poison and expecting that person to get hurt. There's nothing you could do. There's no vindication that unforgiveness will ever accomplish. You need to forgive for you. You need to let go. It is a monumental, tremendous burden on your soul, on your spirit, literally at the emotional, neurological level. And research has been done at length. And I have a quote here confirming, in the context of chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, learning to become more forgiving may be a complementary treatment to cope with the ongoing stress, frustration, and negative emotions that result from both chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. Forgiveness intervention has been shown to reduce the symptoms of people. Studies have found that people who regularly forgive others reap huge rewards in their health, lowering the risk of heart attack, improving sleep, improving cholesterol levels, reducing pain, blood pressure, and of course, anxiety, depression, and stress. And this is why we talk about emotional health and emotional healing, because you might have a rock star, supermodel body and be chiseled and fit, but inside you might just be wasting away. That's why we see so many celebrities literally now they're drinking themselves or they're drinking themselves to death. They're using narcotics or taking their lives for suicide. A lot of people, it doesn't matter how rich and famous and beautiful you might think you are and people think you are. If there's bitterness and anger and resentment and unforgiveness in your soul and spirit, it will eat at you. That's why this is true healing from the inside out. And so again, in the context of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, the the benefits are exceptional, but also, again, we just talked about some things here: blood pressure, cholesterol, heart attack. Like this may be why you can't get on top of and remedy this heart disease issue that you're dealing with. I don't know. I mean, you have chronically elevated hypertension? I mean, are you at a point where your doctor's trying to have you take medication for the rest of your life? And you're like, well, I don't know. I was like, are there other things I can consider? I would say everyone on the planet, regardless of how young or old you are, in fact, the younger you are, the better, because I think it's easier. Instead of years and years of compounding abuse and trauma, just you become hardened. And in your defense, in my defense, I was raised in an abusive household. I get it. Forgiveness is hard, and it's like we create these defense mechanisms to protect ourselves so we don't get hurt again. And some people are afraid to allow themselves to open up to that place, and that's where maybe going back to forest bathing, maybe go outside in nature and just spend some time alone and just if you share my faith, talk to God about it. Just pray about the situation, release it. If you don't share my faith, then consider just going out in nature and thinking about and allowing yourself to slowly go back and find out, okay, what it is that really is bothering you about these people that come to mind, and think about it. Imagine you're in this forest bathing session. Like, this is very practical. Like, this is what they do. This is shinrin-yoku in Japan. This is a prescription, right? You want to do this. You really want to try this on your own right now. Of course, a therapist, great. Emotional recall therapy, fantastic. I highly encourage people to go to a professional if you feel you need that. I was able to do it this alone. And I did it out in nature intuitively, Ari, instinctively. I just felt better. Why? Because I just explain it. You explain it. You're going out in nature. It's like you're just putting yourself at the best possible mood. You're in the best possible health and healing. You're breathing good. You're just hopefully happy. That's the place to be. That's the place to be, to forgive. Not in an environment where you're anxious, full of toxic chemicals, you got TV blaring at you. That's not the place to forgive. That's not the place to do deep emotional work.
Yeah.
So you're outside, and imagine you just start thinking and opening yourself up to, like, who is it? Who are the people that I need to let go? And then allow yourself to go as far as you can without triggering that response. You don't want to be angry. You don't want to be resentful. You don't want to be hateful. But imagine yourself going through the experience like, I'm not going to give them an excuse. I'm not going to make allowance for this, but I'm going to let this go.
Right.
I'm going to leave this here. And you know what? When I read my Bible, when you read the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, you see people putting up sacred monuments for moments like this. Literally, a rock, a boulder, a tree, root, a stick, whatever. Put, like, this could be your monument. You go to your favorite shinrin-yoku position, you find a rock, you find a cool stick, whatever, you just put it on the ground, be like, this is where I forgave. This is where I became free. This is a sacred place for me. And that also becomes an anchor. So if you feel anxious, stressful, you just get hurt from someone again, you go back to your sacred place like they did in the ancient times. We forget. There's a reason. There's a reason for that. It's like a physical imprint on your mind, your brain, your memory, your emotions, every part of you. And if you need to go back to there again, like, look, that's where I forgave. That's where I got free. And this is when it becomes, and guess what happens? And I kid you not, pain just starts to vanish. You start to sleep better. You start to be able to enjoy relationships. You don't have this sense of always being on guard. You find yourself being able to relax around others and being yourself, and you start to experience life in such a way where your blood pressure balances. Well, the research says so. It makes sense to me. Like, wow, you're saying this might be my solution for cholesterol? I don't know. But you know what? It's not going to hurt.
Are there any essential oils in particular that are effective in facilitating that process of forgiveness, or that pair well with forgiveness therapy?
Yeah, it would go back to that orange vanilla example I shared. Whatever aroma is pleasant to you. And this is what's relevant. Whatever aroma is pleasant to you. So for me right now, I've been really anchored with this Douglas Fir orange blend. That's really been my defining blend through this whole pandemic crisis craziness. That would be what I would use. 5 years ago, a blend that I had for me was key lime and bergamot. And it was a blend that I used to overcome some pretty significant obstacles in my path. And I had I did some deep work emotionally, spiritually. I had some physical, projects I had to work on. I wrote my book with that blend, and that was an anchor for me. So this is where intuitive medicine, intuitively walking through, okay, what am I drawn to? What makes me feel good? That's what you want. And like for you, I would say for Ari, for you, I would go outside right where your ylang ylang tree is and do it there. Like that's exactly what you would do. Is like that gives you that sense, that gives you that place of peace. You're outside, you're getting the negative ions, you're getting the fresh air, the sunshine. I can think of no better place on the planet for you if that resonates with you. But other people, like for me, it'd be in the forests of Georgia, the place where I love to be. I love the smells of the pines and the woods. So really what works for you, if you don't have the ability to go outside, physically you're unable to, you're restricted, or you don't have a forest or park nearby, well, that's where aromatherapy, essential oils come deeply into play. And you could do it wherever you want. And you can get an aromatherapy inhaler. I got all these recipes are in my book. You can do a spritzer, diffuser blend. Give yourself a bath. Like, when's the last time you've allowed yourself to just rest? Like, you could do a wonderful like lavender, chamomile, lemon, which is a nice little unique blend. Put that in your bath. Again, we have a recipe for this in my book. And allow yourself 15, 20 minutes where you could just relax a little bit and enjoy the aromatherapy. But again, this is where individualized medicine plays such a key part in someone's healing.
Dr. Z, this has been awesome. I have to say this is one of the most interesting interviews I've done in the sense of having so much novel content that so few people are talking about. And I think listeners will really, really enjoy this when they hear it and get a lot of value from it. So thank you so much. The forest bathing stuff, the forgiveness stuff, really fascinating, good stuff. And of course, all the essential oils and how that figures into this. So your new book is coming out when exactly? What's the date of release?
September 7th.
September 7th.
Yep. Available everywhere books are sold. And Ari, everything's on the table on this one. All this novel stuff was so exciting for me to go through. And I was like a kid at a stevia sweetened candy store, right? I don't go to candy stores, but I want everyone just to go on this journey with me. And I invite you to go to eoapothecary.com, eoapothecary.com. And I have a wonderful little gift package. I have a series of demo videos my wife and I filmed that show you how to make several of the recipes in the book. And we're going to walk you through just step by step. We talk a lot about these little stories, the little things I couldn't fit in the book because there's only so much I could fit into a book. And thank you so much for having me. Like, this has been a wonderful journey, and I can't wait until the next thing comes, because that's the excitement. As researcher to researcher, you know what it's like. Like we are always looking for what's next, what's new, what's cutting edge. And for me, quite frankly, what's new, what's cutting edge usually brings me back 1,000 years. That's kind of where I'm, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, you're telling me forgiveness and forest bathing? Okay. Wow. That's interesting. Like, that's new.
Right.
Yeah. That's cutting edge.
Yeah.
That's how essential oils can help you.
Awesome, my friend. Dr. Z, really such a pleasure to connect with you as always. I look forward to the next time, and good luck with your new book. I hope it is an amazing success.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Hey there, this is Ari again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you found it valuable, please share it with your friends, share it with your family, help me get the word out there. Also, if you're on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell to get notifications every time we release a new video or new episode of the podcast. And if you're listening to this, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or on your favorite podcast Thanks so much for supporting my work at the Energy Blueprint. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you in the next one.